friends, we're back with Nagesh, and we were talking about his college days, and we went through his childhood, boarding school, and then Little Flower School, and now we are at Osmania Engineering College. So, Nagesh, how was that journey?
Those 4 years of college were honestly, I studied chemical engineering, which was different from the College of Engineering.
Okay.
The chemical engineering, that was the only major that was in another college, and it was called the College of Technology. And a lot of people, and I used to participate in a lot of literary and cultural festivals when I was at Osmania University. And because of that, I started getting the nickname Teku, meaning I was from College of Technology. Someone started that, and I remember it became a joke because even when you gave your name, you said, I'm Nagesh from, and I would say College of Technology.
Okay.
So, that was how Teku came about. But those 4 years, honestly, were truly the most fun-filled 4 years. We talk so fondly about our childhood and stuff like that, and most of us have been lucky enough to have very good childhoods. But the 4 years of engineering college, or chemical engineering, were truly wonderful in the sense that obviously being a boy gave me a lot more freedom, but it was fantastic. My dad bought me in the first batch of Hero Hondas that actually came into the country. In the lottery, I got I think number 500 or something, so I got one of the first bikes.
So your ploy of not going out of station worked.
Absolutely.
Getting your bike.
I knew if I got into engineering college through the entrance, that I would be rewarded, and Dad did. So I got a lovely Hero Honda bike, and the best buddies that I spent my college years with. So it was just a fantastic sense of freedom. And here's what I always say about that period, and which I think as adults we miss, is the excitement of the promise of the future. Most of us lose the joy as we get older, and things kind of become a little bit of a routine, which is why I love my filmmaking so much, because each film is like a fresh journey. Whether you like it or not, it's not just another film that you go on set and you direct. And my college days, university days, Osmania University days was just that.
So it's the promise of tomorrow that was always there, the excitement, like looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So you were having a blast in the present. Obviously, like most college boys, we were drinking, we were out late nights, doing all kinds of masti. And yet at the same time, we were studying pretty hard to make sure that our futures were ensured. And the fact that there was something really exciting waiting around the bend. In my case, it was the promise of going to the States. So
I think a lot of people had the dream at that for a long time. Actually, since then, is like going to the States was the ultimate way to go. I think things have changed a little bit now because a lot more opportunities are there.
I agree. Clearly that madness is not there, because I think our class had about 45 students who studied, and I want to say some 22 went to the States. So there was like a 50%
people.
Turnaround. University was just exactly what it promised it would be.
People say college life, Javani Diwani, or it's something like.
It was exactly that. It was just, and honestly, I have a great set of parents. The freedom and the faith was total. So I was given freedom to do anything that I wanted, and they were quite assured that my grades would not slip and that I would not do poorly in class, and I never let them down. So this relationship was perfect. There was never any pressure, as in you can't come home late at night, you can't do this, you can't do that. I had my own key. I came and went as I pleased. So it was wonderful.
Cool. So you were mentioning something about combined studies earlier when we talked about college, So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about this?
Well, this is a phenomenon that existed very strongly at the very least in the 80s. I know it existed before then, but to some extent it was at its peak during the 80s. And again, there was a singular combined purpose, which is everyone wanted to get into engineering or medical college. So there were two buddies of mine, Venu and Sridhar, and including myself. All of us went to Little Flower Junior College in Hyderabad, and all three of us were studying to be engineers. So we started doing combined study when I was in my 12th grade. And basically it meant that you came back from school, you slept for a little while, and then either post dinner or sometimes we had dinner at Venu's place. Sridhar and I would drift there, and somewhere in the 8 o'clock neighborhood the combined study began. What it essentially was that we all went up to the terrace and over
pretended to study.
Over the next 4 to 6 hours, sometimes longer, we studied, we had fun, we chatted, and the whole locality had another about 20 odd students who were all studying to get into engineering or medical, girls and guys, and they'd all come up on the terraces, and then it became like one long distance party. So it was a very fun way to socially interact. Guys were checking out girls and vice versa, and obviously it's at an age where your hormones are going berserk, so there's all this excitement that's floating around in the air. But interestingly enough, the one thing that I should mention was that all of us did well at academics. You know, the baseline was pretty damn decent. It was not a bunch of losers who were all up there having fun, and then when the exam rolled around, none of us did well, because we all did pretty well. People got into Osmania, a couple of people got into IIT, a couple of people into other colleges. So it was great fun, and I mean, there are so many anecdotes, but if I actually wrote another film set during that time, I would 100% incorporate combined studies, because it was just a term to do everything, mostly other than study.
Well, I hope your parents listen to this. Not that they can do anything about it now, but
it's a little late.
So when you were doing engineering, was there anything like about films that was at the back of your mind? Did you think at that time, or?
See, I think here's where things actually start to come together. And when I trace my journey from, engineer to filmmaker, or whatever I did before to filmmaker, I think the actual steps start at this point when I started my engineering, and which is very, very clearly I became movie obsessed. We got a VCR in 85, and that opened up my world, and I obsessively watched movies. When I look back at it, this was not a hobby. This was, I would devour the movies. I mean, it was one movie after the one movie after. There were nights that I would watch 6 movies at a stretch, staying up the entire night. So those 3.5 years of having a VCR before I left for the States were just, barring the periods when I had to study, I was movie obsessed. And I think this is where the first sort of thing starts coming into my mind, going, yeah, maybe this is something I like doing, not just engineering.
So which were the movies that influenced you the most at that time, or that you remember that you enjoyed the most?
There was no conscious thought, but I can tell you this as a blanket statement, that it was American cinema. That's what made the most sense to me, because I could walk to the neighborhood store, and American cinema is the most widely marketed worldwide.
That's true.
So the VHS tapes were right there, and that's where my world exploded. So action films, comedies, anything that I could lay my hands on, boom, brought it home, watched it, brought it home, watched it. Of course, the first germ of when I wanted to be a filmmaker was cast when I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark and walked out of the theater. I think that is when I consciously remember. See, it's easy once you become a filmmaker to romanticize certain events and say, when I sat in the dark theater and the first images appeared, I realized I wanted. So I've thought very hard about when was it consciously the first time I said, and I remember watching Raiders of the Lost Ark and I'm walking out of the theater and I was fried. I remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, I walked out and I was like, oh my God. I mean, if this is the kind of magic, I think maybe that's the first time I wanted to be a filmmaker. And March 11th this year, I actually met Steven Spielberg.
Wow.
And
cool.
I actually got to spend a little time with him and I told him, I said, you're the reason I'm here because that was probably the first.
I think most of his movies have that emotional quotient and everything, whatever he has done so far.
Yeah, and it was just great adventure. I mean, that's how imagination is supposed to soar. That's what books did, and they allowed the audience to interpret. But movies now with special effects and everything, you can really let your imagination soar. But even when he made Raiders of the Lost Ark, it was very difficult. So movies that actually could take adventure to another level, make you feel kind of superhuman in a nice way.
Once you were done with engineering, right? So when was it? I mean, you said you had this dream of going to States. Whether you were influenced by the movies or just this whole phenomenon was there of going to States, right? So at what time did you decide that, okay, this is the next thing, or did you already have it in your mind?
I think I already did. I had enough examples of people who had done engineering and went to the States. So when our turn rolled around, that's what we did. It was very matter of fact. The class kind of divided itself into two sections. One, the one that decided to stay in India took all the exams related to that. There was GATE and other exams. Some went for an IIM. The rest of us, very clear. We took our GREs.
And TOEFL.
Yeah, TOEFL. Some of us took TSC, Test of English as a spoken language, and things like that. And there was a very, very clear path that was laid out. And this was the pre-internet days. So you had to write to the universities, you had to get their application forms, you had to hand fill them, photocopies, and it was very ritualistic. So it wasn't that it was. So that's what I said. We'd be a typical day at College of Technology was classes began at 9:20, but you kind of drifted there. Probably at 9:30 tops. And you headed straight to the canteen. And this is, mind you, after a big massive breakfast at home. But you got to the canteen and instantly there was chai or coffee depending on what you drank. And there were biscuits and samosas, which was very standard. So you did that. 10:10 the class ended. It's amazing that I remember the times even after all these years. And you kind of drifted to the class around 10 o'clock and got into the back bench just so as you could give your attendance. And then right after the class, you rolled back out and headed to the canteen.
Well, you were lucky that your teachers took the attendance at the end of the class. For us, it used to be in the beginning and the end.
Beginning and the end?
Yes. So that people who were drifting could be caught.
See, I always feel this. You cannot force people to actually understand. Yes, sometimes it can be insulting to the teacher or lecturer when you just get up. So we were polite enough. We got up and left when the back was turned. But even if you sit in class, it's not like you're going to get anything out of it.
So, but you're true. A lot of times you don't understand what the teacher is saying or what they're teaching. And
you're there purely because it's a ritual that's in it. So there was actually one professor who I remember very clearly, who said, listen, I cannot force you all to. He tried taking attendance at the beginning. We'd give attendance and then we'd leave. He tried attendance at the end. We'd hover in the back somewhere and then slip in. So this went on, and then finally got frustrated one day and he said, listen, if it is just attendance that you want to be here for, then please give attendance and leave.
Well, that's nice of him actually. That's a rarity.
He thought it would be reverse psychology, but a bunch of us gave attendance and left. He got upset with that also, and then he came around. Then he was very clear. give attendance and leave, which was very smart in my opinion, because you're not going to force anyone to learn at that stage. The ones who are going to fail out will fail.
Those who want to learn will learn.
Yeah. And that's what we did.
And you don't need to sit in the class to learn either, because a lot of times...
You're absolutely right. If a teacher's great, trust me,
students will sit.
Absolutely. You go, oh, he makes it so interesting, he's so challenging, da-da-da. If he's not, it doesn't matter. You just can. And a lot of teachers here just get their tenure and continue teaching. It's not
like it's a passion for them. It's a job for them, which they do. I mean, in all fairness, they do come and take the classes and all. But like you said, it's not like the objective is not that the kids should learn. The objective is finish the course.
Yeah. So that was the typical day, and then we hung out all day either at the cafeteria or at a certain time we had a lounge that opened. It had a couple of table tennis tables, it had caroms, and we played a lot of cards. So this was a typical day. But even in spite of all the fun that we were having, there's always this thing that if things get laid out properly and stuff like that, then I'm going to get a scholarship and then I'll be off to the States. And March 19th, I got my first letter. And the first letter was from Georgia Tech. And it said, we're pleased to offer you a scholarship of $850.
Wow, that's a huge amount.
That was a huge amount back in those days, because this was 87.
Right.
And I just went crazy. I got the letter. I believed Mom to be a good luck charm, so I gave it to her to open it. She opened it, she read, and then I went crazy, hugged her, this, that, grabbed the letter, and immediately drove back to College of Technology. This was around 3 or 4 o'clock, and I was just waving the letter and showing it. It was such a... that's what... I do motivational talks and stuff like that for firms. Schools and colleges, I obviously do it for the joy and fun of it, but I do it as a side thing. And one of the things I tell them is one needs to bring that kind of joy back in your life. That joy and the promise of a better tomorrow. And that excitement. I mean, you feel like you're absolutely ruling the world, and if we can find things periodically to excite us,
excite you and do the next thing.
And I am so lucky that I found something like movies, because it's that same kind of madness. Like the next movie is getting off the ground, and every fiber of your body vibrates with excitement.
So you flew to Georgia Tech.
I flew to Atlanta, but before I got to Atlanta, I was fortunate enough that my sister had already gone there.
Because I was going to ask you, for a middle class family to be able to fund that journey, there's lots of at that time, for getting a visa, you had to show that you had this much bank balance, you needed this. So I was going to ask you, like, what kind of journey did you go through?
It was not that torturous, because Dad was in a very good position at that point. My father worked for the United Nations, UNICEF, that is. And so those elements were neatly in place. We got our bank balances, all that. It was
not an issue.
It was not an issue, and it was wonderful. I remember I left. I think the plane ticket at that time had increased to 8,000 rupees. It was a one-way flight. I took British Airways, and Dad had given me an additional amount of. $500 or $700, I forget. That was my, and then after that my stipend and my scholarship was going to kick in. So I took a little detour. I actually flew to Canada first, spent some time with my cousins. From there I drove across the border to Boston. Then I flew to Los Angeles to visit some more friends, and then I came.
Then you went. Oh wow! Okay, so you had a nice trip before you went to college.
I had a great holiday. I left India August 15th, and I eventually my school was starting around September 21st. So then I got to Atlanta about 2 days before that. So, and again, even as I relate these experiences to you guys, I can't even tell you the excitement that was in me as I visited each city and then eventually landed at Georgia Tech, and I walked onto that campus, and no matter what you say, campuses in the United States are beautiful.
Of course they are. There's no doubt about that.
They
And
are
even
just-
if it's the smallest university,
Absolutely.
it is kept like so pristine and so there's a vibe in there when you go in which you don't
Yep.
find. I mean, honestly speaking, you don't find it in most of the colleges here.
Yep.
I did feel it when I was at the University of Pune. That's where I studied from.
Okay.
So Pune University is completely different. When you just enter, it's a different. The whole campus it's huge campus.
Okay.
So there's a different kind of
Then you're
vibe,
lucky.
but it's different. I agree with you. Like when you go to a campus in the US,
Yep.
the energy, the way people are going, you'll see a lot of people on cycles. That's the
Yeah.
other thing that struck me is like
Yeah.
a lot of people are on cycles over
Yeah.
there.
And you go in there and there are 1,000 things that you can do. There are classes that your scholarship will allow you to take. There's additional stuff that you can add on just if you want to increase your knowledge.
Right.
Forget all that. The whole lounge that the university campuses have for the students, I mean, you're blessed. We had pool tables, we had bowling alleys, you had video rooms with just the latest movies that you could just pop in a DVD and watch a movie. Oh, that just setting foot on that campus was
And especially when you come from India where those facilities are not there.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I think the impact is that much more bigger.
Absolutely. Now that divide has gotten smaller, because ever since India opened up its markets in the early to mid 90s, the technology gap has been bridged.
Right.
But in those pre-technology days, it was just so exciting.
And you get to learn so much because there's so many things you have to learn, like just
Yep.
to keep on par with the
Yeah.
other students in your class.
Yeah.
And like you said, there is an excitement
Yeah.
because it's a challenge, it's excitement, it's everything because you have to fit in.
Yeah.
So
And I honestly have considered this many times, although I don't know if I'll have the courage to do it. I have contemplated taking a break for about 4 to 6 months and going back.
to college.
Yeah, going
Okay.
back to a university in the States and doing something else that excites me. And one of the things I know what excites me is possibly a massive cooking course.
All right, cooking. So do you enjoy cooking?
I love cooking.
All right.
I don't do much of it here, but whenever I'm back in the States, I do a lot of it.
So what kind of cooking? What's your best dish? Let me ask you.
I mess around with stuff. The best cook that I know is my mom, and I take her recipes, then I bastardize it a little bit. I just keep. I don't know if there's a best dish, but cooking like filmmaking is very heavily intuitive, and the great cooks completely cook with intuition.
Okay.
You ask them to actually write a recipe down and they go for a toss, and my mom's a great example. So you kind of cook by feel.
Right.
And I never claim to be a great cook, but I know I can cook without a plan. I can just start with something and
Right.
work my way and prepare
Yeah,
a dish
and
or two.
Come on, and the dish comes out great.
Pretty decent.
Pretty decent. I get it.
Some days it comes out very well. Some
Well, I'm
days
sure
not so
there
well.
are experiments that don't work out as
Yeah.
you expected them.
Yeah.
So what we talk about is how a traditional recipe is taken and how you
Okay.
can change different things in it, or if you have done it. So
Okay.
just share it with it. So all right, so we can ask you to cook something for us maybe someday when if we meet you somewhere in the US.
Someday, exactly.
So when you went to Georgia Tech, did you cook a lot or?
I
you
started like
dorms? Did
no,
you stay in dorms?
No, especially in university towns, the access to dorms are a little better. But Georgia Tech was situated in the heart of Atlanta,
Okay.
so there were campus dorms, but they were impossible to get.
Okay.
And usually the undergrads got it. Once you came to graduate school,
Okay.
you just had to fend for yourself. So I, like everyone else, you went to the Indian Student Association. You tried to find other Indians to pair with.
Right.
And in the campus board you kind of posted. It's funny, the first 6 months I had a roommate whose name was Nagesh. I mean, what is the probability, and he was from Andhra.
Wow. So this is.
Yeah. What is the probability that, and yeah, I was standing at the board and some guy walks up and I said, oh, hi, and he said he was in the aeronautical engineering department, and both were looking for roommates, and we decided to room together. But having said that, one of the beautiful things about going to the States, and I always tell people and encourage them to do this, is my first job was to mix and absorb that culture. So absolutely, I ended up doing the reflex thing, which is your safety zone. I ended up staying with an Indian. It was only for the first 6 months. After that, I always roomed with Americans. I enjoyed that experience of interacting with different people, and one of the things that I can say proudly is, again, within the first 6 months, I became co-chair of the Georgia Tech International Festival.
Wow. Okay.
And I had no clue. I just saw this campus flyer, so I went to a meeting, and this amazing lady who ran the Georgia Tech Foreign Students Office, I remember her name, Linda Duckworth. She did this Georgia Tech International Festival every year, encouraging people to showcase their countries and cultures and stuff like that. And she said, we need people to chair the festival, and I raised my hand, not knowing what it entailed, but it was a blast because it was the quickest way to get to know people.
Right? Absolutely.
And it's very, very ironic because I started out that way, and then when you actually look at me years later as a filmmaker, I completely became an introvert. So there it was like, get out there, meet people, mix and this and all that, and here I just kind of went into a shell.
Well, but there's no spotlight on you, I guess.
That was the problem. That clearly was the problem.
Right,
absolutely.
Because you're just living your life, you're just part of something. But once you become
you're put under a microscope and
right,
people start looking at you. Yeah.
Right. So that's when I guess it's when your privacy gets invaded.
You kind of tend to withdraw.
Right. Whereas over there, it's just you're living it, and it's not like somebody is coming in and into your life and like trying to.
I agree.
Get information. So what prompted from Georgia Tech, finished Georgia Tech, to filmmaking? How did that journey happen? And
it was strange, but when I was at Georgia Tech, I tried very hard to take courses related to films or anything related to the arts.
Okay.
But the time that I was at Georgia Tech, it was skewed towards being an engineering school. So even though it had an MBA department, I think they gave out a MMS, Masters in Management Sciences, and it didn't have the other faculties developed as much as other universities would. It was a terrific engineering school. It was ranked very high.
Right.
But barring that, there was nothing else.
Okay.
So I tried very hard to take courses away from my sphere. Because of my scholarship, I could take as many courses as I wanted, and I couldn't.
Okay.
So that was a little bit of, and I think even there I felt the stirrings. I always felt it. Like I mentioned earlier, the 4 years that I was at Osmania University, I almost averaged a film a day.
Okay.
It was that kind of insanity. And so when I went there to Georgia Tech, I felt that it was something I should explore. If there is an editing class, I'll take it. If there is film appreciation, I'll take it. But there was nothing. So I just kind of
so you
let
just
it be.
took some other courses, or you just didn't?
I took some courses, but I was your prototype lazy Indian. I took the bare minimum courses. So in the first 3 quarters, I finished my entire master's coursework.
Okay.
And then I was just hanging around, screwing around, doing nothing much. I did research. Only the research that was necessary to get my master's, not one paisa beyond that.
Okay.
I had a fantastic advisor, and the poor man would try to, excite me and encourage me into, the different aspects of chemical engineering, and I did only that was required.
Was needed. Okay.
Yeah, and this is where again I tell people that it's a great clue. In India, we have one extreme. You're conditioned to do things a certain way. In the States, you have the other extreme. You're supposed to be free and you're supposed to explore, and so there are casualties in both.
Absolutely.
But when I'd gotten there and I kind of realized my reluctance at learning anything instinctively, it was, I think, the first stirrings that something was wrong.
Okay.
Because but that was also the only way I knew how. I studied something and I did well.
Okay.
So I never had to push myself. But the way education is set up in the States is you have to understand, you have to love the stuff, otherwise you'll do badly.
Absolutely.
So I kind of did, I didn't do badly. I did fine at my master's, graduated well, but I wasn't. My heart was not in it,
okay.
And I was trying very hard to, but I also knew very clearly that I needed a master's, I needed a job. First get financial security, then kind of do whatever the heck you want. So it was just one of those, bear down,
just do it,
get your degree, then think about it.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I did.
So what did you all along think that you wanted to be a filmmaker, or
I didn't know exactly. See, and it was funny. I had trouble. I didn't enjoy studying chemical engineering clearly in my masters and stuff. I loved living in the States. I loved the university. The moment I got my job, I loved my job, and I was good at it. Because it was interaction with a lot of people, it was about communication skills. I used my chemical engineering, but very little. I worked as an environmental consultant.
So I think it's working with the people that excited you.
And the freedom to actually understand and do your stuff. Chemical engineering was so much about not understanding stuff, but just learning it blindly and, spitting it out on paper. So I did that, but after the first 3 years of working, it became very apparent that now what?
It's like you wanted to get a skill, you got it. What next?
And it's very easy again when you're doing something and you say, one day, मैं कुछ करूँगा. But right now I have to do this. Okay, so you do that. Then you get to the next step. Then you say, one day मैं कुछ करूँगा, but right now I have to do this. Finally, I'd gotten a job, and I got a green card, and I was secure financially. Now all the checklists were done. Now there were no excuses. And then the question became, now what? And it's so funny. I always say this, unhappiness is a great motivator. Because when you're unhappy, you instinctively start looking for other stuff to do.
To make you happy. So that's how things...
Absolutely. We have a we gravitate very naturally towards happiness. So 3 years into my job, it became very apparent. Things were going very well. I was a supervisor, one of those quick climbers in the company, everything. But I wasn't like happy. And that's the first time
But most people don't realize it.
I realized it. I clearly, and I was lucky that I realized it.
So this is actually, the reason why I'm asking this is, when you say you realized it, what were the pointers, that made you, at least I'm just thinking like maybe somebody listens, they'll understand, right? So there must be some pointer that, like, how can one realize that, okay, this is not making me happy? And probably each person's journey is different, but...
See, the most obvious ones are, when you do companies' annual review and they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Mine was always a big question mark. And then I would answer very lamely, like, I want to be higher up and, maybe get an MBA and some nonsense like that. But I think there is an unhappiness that creeps in. And I've made a joke of it by saying that one of the nightmares that I used to have, and it was very true, is that someday I'd be in my 40s, I'd have a house in the suburb, a wife and 2 kids and a dog, and realize that that was the end of my dream, that I never followed my dream.
Okay.
So for most people, that's an aspirational step.
Right.
A larger house, a better job, again, a wife or a mate, kids. I mean, these are all steps. And for me, that clearly was a big no-no.
Okay.
Because it meant that I had talked about my dream but never really had the courage to follow through. Even now when I think back on my days when I actually did the transition, and it took a long time, because movies, you need epiphanic moments. In real life, it's never that. It takes a very, very long, tiring process before you actually make the move.
Right.
Years. Those years seem like a haze, like someone else did it. I can't believe that I myself did it. And trust me, this is not false humility. I'm genuinely saying, when I look back on it, to chuck away a stable job.
Right, it's not easy at all, and it's a big step.
And it's a long process. You have to. Let me give you the obvious pointers. You walk into your boss's office and say, "Okay, I want to quit my job," and they go, "Why you're doing so well at the company? What's the reason?" "No, I want to do something else." "What's this?" And you're a guy in Atlanta with absolutely no connections to filmmaking. You're dreaming about going back to India, and the only reason, the initial thrust was that I could use my Indianness to tell Indian stories, which would be very unique, but I could also make a movie cheaper in India. That's how I ended up on these shores.
So when was this aha moment for you that you realized that this is it?
There are several ones, but about, like I always say, about 3 years into my job, this unhappiness crept in, and that's when I started looking for different things to do. And I think fate had a very strong part to play in it. I'm a firm believer in fate. I remember that I had decided that I wanted to do something related to the acting field. So I looked up the yellow pages, and there were modeling agencies. So I just went to one.
Okay.
And honestly, they're good, but most of them, it's a racket. So this, they said, non-Caucasian guy in his 20s. It's we don't have anyone like that on our roster, so it's very necessary that you come. And they do some skills. They train you in some modeling skills and some nonsense like that. You pay, back in those days, it was like $400 odd.
Okay.
So they get about 25-30 people each class.
Right.
But at the end of it, you have to have what's called a headshot. That's the way business is done in the States. That everywhere, a headshot is basic picture of yourself. A black and white picture of yourself, not a color picture. And on the back is your resume, which is stuck. On the front is your photograph. And that's what is given out by agents that you hand out to people. That's the way you say, I'm in the business. My qualifications are on the back. Check me out. Do you like me? Call me in for an audition. So I went to this modeling agency, and I did a modeling course, and I even modeled for Wilson's Leather and some nonsense. We got little odd jobs that paid nothing. But it was kind of exciting while I was chemical engineering by day, and I did this by night. And one of the places where I was getting my headshot photocopied, this lady said that, you have a very interesting face, you should try acting. So I honestly thought it was another scam. So she gave me a card. She said, I study at this place called Warehouse Actors Theatre, and I think you should do it too. I didn't bother. Fast forward, I was getting little odd jobs as a model, going on auditions and stuff like that. One day I was really frustrated. Things were, I kept, again, I'd been talking so long about doing something else with my life, about doing something with movies, and I was doing nothing. So I said, and I remember I said, this woman had given me the
card.
So I picked up the card, and I called, and it was an answering machine. I left a message. And the next day someone called me. And they said, we got your message. We'd like for you to come in for an interview. And I was like, it's an acting class. I should just be able to go and pay up.
Right.
But they had a very unique system. So the guy who started it, Judson Vaughn, he did an interview. He kind of found out about what you did, and only if things matched, then took you into class.
Oh, okay.
But that place really opened up the filmmaker in me.
So when you say match something, how does that work? Like whether you were interested in acting, or what is it that they match in terms of?
He wanted more to find out about you as a person.
Okay.
So it was that kind of thing.
Okay.
Unless you were a total jerk, I don't think he turned anyone away. But he kind of wanted to
find out what kind of a person. Okay.
So I must rewind a little bit. I always tell people this, that when you're trying to veer off and do something else, it's not a bad thing to gain some knowledge and then take a radical step. Because with absolutely no knowledge, if you take a radical step, it's stupidity, in my opinion. Again, I come from a very stable thinking kind of background. So when I was actually this period of unhappiness, I had read about this place called Rockport workshops. It happens in Maine.
Okay.
And I've recommended, now it's been 15 years since I became a filmmaker, so it's gotten diluted. But I recommended it to so many people, it's not funny. Saying, go to Rockport. So I went to Rockport, and I did a 1 week's workshop on film production.
Okay.
So it taught the different aspects, but it excited me. I did that, I came back, and then I did nothing else with it.
Okay.
But with that little 1 week, I thought, I was totally equipped as a filmmaker, that I'm totally ready. But it wasn't until I started studying at Watt that, boom, my world opened up.
So that was an acting school, or was it?
That was an acting school. Okay. There was an acting school that taught acting for the camera. So while I learned to be an actor, I actively learned to be a director.
Okay.
Because instantly mapping, scene division, shot breakdown, all this was happening at the back of my head without me consciously thinking about it. But I was one of those excitable guys. I used to work all day, come to the class at 6. Class was from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. After 10 p.m. I would rehearse till 12 or 1 in the morning. It was that kind of madness. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it. And there I started realizing this potential of being in a scene where I was acting myself, but sort of realizing, this is not the way we planned it. That mistake happened and I screwed up on this line. So at the end, when we finished the rehearsal, I'd say, you did this wrongly or you did this right. And these were things that were just happening without me consciously realizing it. Much later, after I became a filmmaker, I was like, those were the early...
The seeds or the sparks, that showed that you, that is a director...
the signs clearly.
Right.
That I had the ability to kind of extricate myself from the process and look at it from an outsider. So that place made all the difference. So I think
there's one question which I'll ask later, which I just want to note down, is like, when you direct, right, there is an actor, sometimes you act in your movies.
Correct.
So how do you manage that? But I'll reserve that later on.
Okay.
We'll just talk about that because we're just going through the process.
Okay.
So you said that this
so I studied at... Yeah. So I studied at the Warehouse Actors Theatre for a while, about a year and a half. And then finally that day had come when I needed to make the next step. And that's what I did. I know there was a little bit of an epiphanic moment there because on one of the audition jobs that I went to, I was driving back from Greenville, South Carolina to Atlanta, which is roughly about a 2-hour drive. And I was in a humongous car wreck. And I walked away without a scratch on my body.
Wow.
And I said, oh wow, this must really mean that I'm meant for something else. And I said, okay, now I need to do something. I need to change my life and stuff like that. And I did nothing. Because that's what you do in real life.
It's true.
You have all these amazing things and you march forward and then it fizzles out. And that's what happened. But then one night I was coming back from work pretty late and a similar accident almost happened. And I said, how much longer am I going to do this?
How many signs do you
How many signs do I really need? So the next day actually I went and I told my boss I wanted to quit. And even, I make a joke of this when I do my whole talk about how the whole process happened. But I was feeling so bad because this was an office I helped start in Atlanta. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to fall apart without me. So I geared up, I walked in and I said, I'm sorry, I want to quit. And he said, okay. I was like, that's it? And here I was,
So you were expecting something else.
Like, no, don't quit and, we'll miss you. And all this guilt was eating me up inside that I was bailing out on them, that I was not doing the right thing. And he said, okay. I was like, okay, all right, I guess that's it. Yeah. So then I went to my acting class and I announced that today I've quit.
So was it apparent to them that you were not enjoying yourself, that your boss was like, just
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. But I have a feeling that, when they see someone fired up for a certain number of years and then you see them not fired up, I guess there are obvious indicators.
There are some signs, right? Because
I think so. I think so. So I went to my acting class, I announced that I was done. Then I went home and in a very dramatic fashion, there were workers in the parking lot. I went to them and asked them if they wanted all the stuff in my house. And they were like, dude, are you sure you're not pulling a trigger? I was like, no. So they came, they took the furniture. They took...
So you decided to come back to India and just do movies, or...
I did something as dramatic as this because I felt that even though I'd done a gesture like quitting my job, that if I did not actually do something like this, that I would chicken out. So I did that, and I came back to India the first time. This was towards the end of 95, without a plan. I just came to India and I thought I had some vague plan. I'd already done some modeling and acting, so I said, maybe I'll get an acting job. Then maybe I'll work with someone as an AD, and then maybe I'll direct. I mean, it was all vague. It was the stupidest thing that I ever did. But it needed that kind of stupidity. So I came off to India. I'm like, okay, here I am.
Well, some people call it stupidity, some people call it courage, right?
Well, both go hand in glove. Huh? They're very, very close to each other. But I came here, and of course I was shattered because there's nothing for me to do.
Right. So how did your family react to this?
Well, obviously they knew. See, the freedom that was always given to us is something that, even though they were shocked, they were scared, they were hoping that it would just be a passing fancy, they never crowded me. They never pushed me. So when I came towards the end of 95, like I said, I came without a plan. And I didn't know what to do. So someone gave me some references in Bombay. So I went to Bombay. I went to some ad agencies. They asked me to bring photographs. So I brought my photographs, the modeling photographs that I had. I gave it to them. They said they have thousands upon thousands people walk through the doors every day and give them photographs. They said, okay, thank you, we'll get in touch. And that was that. So, and then I went to a set to see, how it is to make films. I got a friend of mine, his uncle's an actor, so he made a phone call, and I went to the set of a television show that was being shot in Hyderabad called Veer Hanuman. And this has a longish answer. I usually, when I do my talk, this forms the middle portion of the talk about how that serial changed my life. But basically it was this. It became very apparent that kind of filmmaking, what was being done there was indicative of the kind of filmmaking that was being done in India at that time, was definitely not for me.
So you knew that what you didn't want, even though you didn't know what you wanted, but at least...
And that was one of the most shattering days of my life. So if you rewind and recap all the things I'd done, I'd quit my job, I'd thrown away everything, I brought my savings, and again, partially the fault was mine because I didn't have a plan. But when I sat on the set that day and I looked at it, I said, no, the only way out of this is to make my own film. Okay. So then came the next question, what do you make a film on?
Right.
So during my Atlanta days, I had written my first screenplay. I'd taken a screenplay writing class on the side, so I wrote my first screenplay. And it was a very average to bad screenplay. But out of the, this really horrible situation in Hyderabad that I was just trapped, came this amazing thing, I'm going to write my own screenplay. And I wrote Hyderabad Blues.
Okay.
That was the first step. I sat there in my room, hardly showering. I wrote Hyderabad Blues 7 days with a pencil on white paper. I still have the original script. It was a full script written by hand, like a madman. My hands were cramping and hurting.
So it's like everything that was there in your mind about just had to come out on the paper.
Yeah, I mean, it was... when you're writing your early couple of screenplays, one of the pieces of advice that you get is write about things that you know. So I ignored that advice and wrote my first screenplay, which was quite bad. And then I wrote Hyderabad Blues, which was about stuff I knew.
Right.
Environments that I knew, stuff that was happening to my friends, but that I knew well. So I combined all that and I wrote it. And that gave me a fresh lease of life. So there was a client of mine who had told me that someday if you're looking for a job, give me a call. So I called him from India and I said, is that offer still open? He said, heck yeah. So I ran back to the States. I started another job, this time with a Fortune 500 company. And here's where, this is the only piece of advice that I always give people. I say, when fate will tempt you, and really test you to see if you have it in you to take that extra step. And when you do, it pays off. And the job that I ended up getting was my dream job. We were in charge of the environmental group for the entire Cabot Corporation. It was just 4 or 5 of us, and I was the only single guy, so it entailed non-stop travel. And I love travel to different countries, different plants, and it was a very dynamic job. I loved it. But my bigger dream was there, and the reason I went back to do the job is when I wrote Hyderabad Blues, I also budgeted it, and I knew that I had to go back, work, save as much as I could, then bring the savings to make Hyderabad Blues. I knew what the math was. So I went back, I started working with Cabot, and just as a reminder that I would never chicken out, I had a completely empty apartment. I had 2 suitcases and a sleeping bag on the floor.
Okay. So how long did you work there?
Cabot, I worked for close to 10 months.
Okay.
I saved every penny. And towards the end of 96, as a matter of fact, just a few days before New Year's, I landed up in India. And my epiphanic moment was about 3 months prior to that, 96, we were having a corporate retreat. My boss found out that I had plans of leaving. And he said, why? You're doing so well. And da-da-da. Then he took me to the vice president. And the vice president said, okay. Don't rush to any decisions. Let's have a talk. So later, as the day unwinded, while we played golf and we wined and dined and we're sitting and sipping cognacs, he said, I'll tell you what. I know you got to take care of some personal stuff. I don't know what that is, but here's what I'm offering. I'm offering you a corporate environmental / management job, which is what he knew I wanted in Boston. Within a year, I'll bring you to corporate. And just to sweeten the pot, I'm giving you $35,000 in stock options. $35,000 in 1996 was a nice chunk of change. It was really not shabby. All to make sure I didn't leave. And I think this was the last test that fate kind of thrust in my path.
To check whether you were strong enough to go on the path or not.
Bail. But I did. I'm telling you, it seems like a dream when I think back on it, how I could turn down something like this. And I was tempted. I was really tempted because I told myself, I said, listen, if I just take this and I work for 3 years, then I'll get these $35,000 and da-da-da, and everything will add to my film. But I would have lost my courage. I think that inner voice told me that if you don't take the step now, you're not going to get the courage ever again. And I think in all our lives, it's always that.
Right. There's a point in time where either you take it and you enjoy it later on, or you probably regret it
for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so I quit that job and I came to India.
And the rest is history. Stay tuned and join us in our next episode, where we continue Nagesh Kukunoor's journey into the movies.